Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Budney. I'm the chair of the Political Action and Member Education Committee, and I'm very glad that you can make it out today, for that's true, isn't it? Identifying and countering the misuse of information with Dr. Ahmed El-Rawi. I'll tell you more about Dr. El-Rawi's work in a minute. We'll start with our land acknowledgement, though. NASA respectfully acknowledges that we are located on the traditional lands now known as Treaties 6 and 7 territory, home to many First Nations, Métis, and other Indigenous peoples. Decolonization, racial equity, and a diverse, inclusive, and accessible workplace for all members are fundamental NASA values that guide us in our everyday work and the decisions we make. We encourage members to reflect on their own relationship and responsibility to this land, and we will continue to be an active partner with these and other Indigenous allies across Turtle Island so long as we are welcome. All right. So I'd like to take a minute and introduce you to our speaker today. Dr. Ahmed El-Rawi is an associate professor of news, social media, and public communications at the School of Communication at Simon Fraser University in Burnaby, BC. Dr. El-Rawi is a dual PhD holder in English literature as well as media and communication studies, and has been associated with media and studying media for well over 20 years now. His experience with media goes back to 2002 when he was the communications officer and a spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross in Iraq. He has authored 10 plus academic books, over 100 research papers, and has been a consultant with various NGOs and humanitarian groups. He's been an expert witness at the Canadian Senate and twice with the House of Commons. Dr. El-Rawi is the director of the Disinformation Project, and he works on a wide variety of topics that he'll tell us more about, but he's worked with racism, and his more recent research involves looking at viruses and fact-checking Instagram. So Dr. El-Rawi, thank you very much for giving us your time today, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much again, Lisa and Scott, for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here and talking. I'm going to share my slides. It's just a quick note that I'm not feeling great today. It's been a while, having some health challenges, but I'll do my best to be presenting, my slides and talking in the best I could. Okay, thank you. So, assuming you can see the slides. The discussion today is about maybe a little bit about misinformation and mostly countering the misuse of misinformation. Now, I just want to highlight something which is important, I think. When it comes to countering misinformation, there is actually no magic key. It really depends on the context, the topic, also the timing. There are so many things involved here, so many factors involved. That's something I would like to highlight for sure. Okay, now before proceeding about how to counter misinformation, how to talk to conspiracy theorists, I would like just to share one slide with you, which is related to reality, the truth, versus our perception of issues. And I'll take one, which is the issue of immigration. So, for example, in Canada, according to the census and different polls, 1 in 4 people, about 23%, counted during the 2021 census, are landed immigrant or permanent residents of Canada. Now, the issue here is that if you ask probably a lot of Canadians, they might say it's even higher. They might say it's 50%. When I looked at different countries, so the bars in yellow is the perception of people regarding immigration. The bar in blue is the actual truthful data, the actual numbers of immigrants in each country. Now, notice in all the countries surveyed, Australia, Germany, up to even Japan, There is a gap between what people perceive to be the real number of immigrants and the reality, the truth. Now, I think this is an important slide to start with to show you that the information we consume, in most cases, whether we get it from people or from around us, in most cases, might not give us, most cases, might not give us the real, actual, truthful picture. And this is the situation with misinformation. In other words, the media, the sources we look at will give us an idea of what the world is, which might not be actually what the world is all about. So this is the kind of gap we have. So moving on, I would like to just share with you some of the work I have been working on. So I worked with cognitive scientists from different places, Germany, UK, and other places, to produce this book during COVID-19, the early months of COVID-19. We wanted to write something that could be useful, practical. So in this way, of course, some of the tips that have been suggested include this is the standard kinds of tips. Identify reliable sources that you can use. Use critical thinking, but I'm very critical even about critical thinking, because what does this really mean, critical thinking? Recognize your own biases when you look at issues. Media literacy is always mentioned. It's actually one of the buzzwords. And I'm going to challenge this because in my mind, I don't think the key answer is media literacy. Because if you look at some of the most popular spreaders of misinformation, like Alex Jones and other people, they are actually among the most literate in terms of media. So it's not a really the key is not having literacies or skills. It's the key is far more than that. It could be more ideological, avoiding echo chambers, which means your own filter bubble or your own biases. What I'm going to focus on in this talk, I only have about 20 minutes left, is mostly how to communicate effectively and the issue of fact checking. I will try to problematize it in different ways. So I'm going to use also, of course, prior research, this handbook, and a few other things that we have worked on. But again, as a reminder, I'm not going to give you the answers. It's actually very much relevant to the context, the people you're talking to, the background, and the timing. But I'm going to give you probably some tips that might be useful, but might not. Okay, so talking about communicating effectively. So some of the things, again, NASA asked me to address this issue. Some of the things that are needed when you talk to people who believe in misinformation is that definitely, number one, we need to be respectful and empathetic. This is very useful because if not, people will not listen to us. If you make fun of them, if you, for example, find that their claims are very superficial and unfounded and do not need any addressing, they will not listen. Um, and the second part is, of course, listen to their perspectives. One thing we have in Vancouver is that the flat earthers, people who believe that the earth is flat, um, have like a considerable number of community members here in Vancouver. Now, for me, a lot of people, when I talk about flat earthers, they laugh. But for me, I feel that it's far more important to understand where their ideas come from. How did they end up feeling, believing that Earth is flat? That's an important question because if you know the answer to that question, you will be able probably to discuss it with them. So, for example, you need to ask questions, clarify any misunderstanding, and of course, present your evidence in a non-confrontational manner, which means avoid any kind of tension when it comes to this discussion with regard to misinformation. So these are general tips. Some of the techniques also definitely we have to have logical arguments. So if you want to argue with someone who believes in misinformation, you've got to do your homework. And I think I have one of these slides available. Your evidence has to be based on facts, and it has to be also based on avoiding any kind of emotive language, shouting, or making generalizations or accusations against people. That's an important thing. Again, try to keep some kind of connection between you and the other person you are talking to who believes in misinformation. So we produced a flyer. Maybe Lisa, I can share the slides with you if anyone is interested. Like these are some of the steps that might be helpful. Notice I'm very careful with my word choice. I say might because it does not always work. Like in my career, I have talked to many people who believe in misinformation. Some of them are my friends, others are relatives. Some of them could be convinced with facts, but majority are actually very much happy with where they are. Most of the issues I talk about are related to either politics or health, very much, for them relevant to their own lives. So, for example, these are some of the steps. Um, Assess how willing they would listen, try to go private, avoid scientific jargon if you can, pick your battles, don't argue about everything. Try to take one piece of misinformation and tailor this message. Um, the important thing is, of course, to refer to the agreement among experts. That's an important thing. In science, we proceed based on scientific consensus, which is the agreement of the majority of people about a certain topic. Take climate change. So there is an agreement among scientists, which is about 95, maybe it depends on which data you look at, 96%, maybe 94%, that the changes in the climate are happening due to human activity. There is an agreement on that. However, there is a small minority, maybe 4 to 5% of climate scientists who believe that there are other factors. So, of course, there is some kind of disagreement, which is the basis of science. What we need here is to look at this kind of consensus, and that's how we proceed as a society. We rely on science. So we can depend on this kind of agreement among experts about different issues we are talking about. Okay, there is a technique called pre-bunking. I do have a slide on this. Maybe I skip it, or maybe I'm not sure where to talk about it. But basically, it's about using preemptive procedures, which means before you see the misinformation, you can talk about like a piece of false information and correct it before it is being discussed. So pre-bunking. The other one is called debunking. Again, it's supposed to be after the fact. So you hear it and then you try to fact check it. Okay, so these are some of the other steps, like again, ask questions, don't attack, be respectful, establish your legitimacy by relying on the consensus, and take it step by step, and don't overwhelm them. It's called information bombardment with a lot of information. Again, these might be very general, might not work, it depending on the situation. But I do have other tips that I would like to share. For example, this is important. We've got to talk about in a very transparent and clear way with regard to risk and uncertainty. Two very important things. So, number one, when it comes to issues regarding vaccines, for instance, if there are any risks about taking the vaccines, they have to be clearly stated so that we become, transparent about the any kind of side effects that vaccines could have. That's important. And also, of course, we use facts. The other issue is uncertainty. If we are not sure about something, especially when we talk about agreement among scientists, if they are not sure, this has to be clearly communicated as well. Unfortunately, when COVID-19 happened, many members of the public health authorities in Canada were not good at these two things. This is where they failed, actually. communicating uncertainty about masking, about issues, other issues, airborne transmission. They were not good at it. If they were not sure, they should have clearly stated it. And this created in the end some confusion among people. Okay, so I go as I promised. I go to the inoculation theory, which is about what do they call vaccination to knowledge, saying that people could be inoculated with a weakened form of persuasion to build immunity against any kind of persuasive arguments and engaging people's critical thinking skills. So usually it has two elements: warning recipients of the threat of misleading persuasion, and identifying techniques used to mislead or the fallacies that underline false arguments. It could be based on logic, or it could be based on facts or source-based. So you can use different techniques, either it's facts or logic, mean anything that makes sense, and or the source. That could be very helpful. So, for example, if it is written in a peer-reviewed academic journal, you can cite it. And this is the difference between pre-bunking, which is preemptive, and debunking, which is reactive. This is more like a chart showing you the strategies to counter misinformation. So here it's all about anticipating the themes that might emerge from misinformation. And here again, prepare fact-based alternative accounts. That's very important when it comes to doing your homework. So notice here, even with debunking, I do have a few slides on that, if my time allows. You start with the facts. You move to the myth, you mention it once, explain the fallacy of this myth, and then repeat the fact so that they can remember it. But again, I would like to emphasize, this is not brainwashing. This is just a technique to talk to people. And this technique seems to be effective among certain groups, but it doesn't mean that it is effective all the time. Actually, some of the debunking practices or processes have seemed to be not that powerful or successful in many other contexts. But again, it could help. So these are some of the techniques, and when it comes to effective debunking, I'm just highlighting them again. The fact, do your homework, especially if you anticipate that you're going to a setting or a meeting where people will talk about certain issues, maybe climate change, maybe they talk about health, vaccines, and so on. So it can be useful just to have some kind of background information about it. And it should not be very complex or complicated. Warn about the myth. Only one repetition is useful without repeating it, and explain why it's wrong. This is important. So, for instance, why the mistaken information was thought to be correct in the first place, if it is the case. Why it is now clear it is wrong. 3, why the alternative is correct, your alternative. So, for example, there was a claim once circulated that vaccines cause autism. There was like a British doctor, medical doctor, who published a paper. It was actually not a paper. It was more like a brief results in the British Journal of British Medical Journal, I think, and which was then retracted afterwards, claiming that vaccines could cause autism among children. And that is something that is still being used to reject taking any kind of vaccines. So here you can start with why the mistaken information was thought to be correct in the first place, and then you move on to provide the alternative solution, especially again highlighting the fact once again, if possible, of course. Now, this is again, as I mentioned, the standard way that has been discussed in the literature. But I think there are also better, I'm not sure whether there are better ways, but I think there are also more effective ways by which you can actually talk to people who believe in misinformation. And probably step by step, you can make changes to their own, framework, like thinking frameworks, especially if you use an alternative shared identity. So let's suppose I am now talking to someone who believes in a conspiracy theory that, for instance, the U.S. government is using, it's called the blue beam conspiracy theory, that the U.S. government is using satellites to direct lasers at people on Earth and harm them. So let's suppose I'm talking about it with this person. I can actually start with invoking an alternative shared identity. So in other words, what do I share with this person talking about this issue? I have to find a common ground to create some kind of rapport with that person. So this kind of alternative identity could be maybe gender identity. We are both men, or people are both women, or age, or geographic location, or nationality. There has to be something. We all share a lot of commonalities that we can probably discuss, maybe even food preferences, anything that would create a connection. And from there, of course, you can challenge the lay epistemology. According to Professor Young, I think from Delaware University, she talks about lay epistemology, which is like the common knowledge of people about certain issues. They think, many people think they know the truth, but in actually it's not based on any scientific facts. So that's where you can challenge this lay epistemology. A lot of people have this, what they call the wisdom, okay, that would guide them in life. But most of the cases, it's not accurate. And how can we do that? We can invoke this kind of alternative shared identity, but it has to be done step by step. Again, if you have the interest, if you have the time to pursue this, because we cannot do this with everyone. It's impossible. Moving on, I see I have about 5 minutes left. I try to be quick. When it comes to fact-checking information, not talking to people, of course, there are tips that we can rely on. But I would just like to mention that fact-checking, like the question is, can fact-checking research correct false beliefs? Actually, according to research, it could sometimes, but in most cases, it is not that effective, especially when a person is very much politically motivated, have very strong ideas about a certain topic. It's really hard to fact check them. It does not work. There is actually a term called the backfire effect, which is some correction sometimes strengthen, does the opposite, strengthen misperceptions among certain ideological subgroups, especially those who have very strong beliefs about what they like, what they're looking at or focusing on. And this is, of course, also connected to the concept of motivated reasoning theory, which talks about how people sometimes interpret information in a way that supports their own pre-existing beliefs. And again, it's about maybe direct experience with the vaccine. Someone had a relative who died in front of them, and they feel, no, vaccines are wrong, and so on. And so it could be connected to their own lived experience. So in other words, fact checking does not always work, unfortunately. But when it comes to you as an individual, trying to understand whether what you read on the screen is truthful or not, there are some questions you can ask yourself to have a more informed decision about the issue. For instance, you can ask yourself, does the source you're reading have a credible reputation? Whose agenda is being served? Could there be alternative claims? Have the claim been debunked by different fact-checking groups like Snopes and AFP and so on? This could be helpful in understanding whether what you read is truthful or not. There are more questions here I borrowed from the verification handbook for journalists. Again, happy to share these slides. The questions about you inquire, just have them in the back of your mind. Who made this information? What is it? What does it mean? And how is there? What could be the implications? Just like some what we call intellectual exercise that could help guide you. But we can fall into the trap of misinformation, and it's really challenging. Because according to Potter, who writes about media literacy, there are different things we need to take into account. The news criteria, the type of sender, intention, accuracy, and context. And in most cases, we don't know really. Like, what is the intention of the sender? How can I know? I wish I know. I wish I have a crystal ball telling me like what people intend to say when they talk to me. But this doesn't work, especially if you're looking at the screen. So it's very, very difficult and complicated, if not multi-layered. And in some cases also, it could be challenging, especially if we lack the technology behind it. So I'm sharing with you this picture, for example. I'm doing a study about the bird flu misinformation, and this was flagged by Instagram as being altered, which is AI generated. This is, of course, Anthony Fauci from the US. I honestly don't know how it's altered, but it seems to be they have this kind of, I don't know, technology identifying misinformation, especially AI generated content. But what I'm saying here is that it could be very challenging to see that this is actually not a real image. I cannot see it in my own eye, but it's they do have that it does have something that shows it is altered. And that's again, I talk about the challenge of fact checking. Something else, when it comes to claims, some of the claims made on social media or elsewhere could be complicated even for experts. Take this example. Again, I told you about the bird flu project I'm working on. So we had this, which has not been flagged by Instagram as misleading. So this is an animal group called Texas Animal Fighters, something. It's an animal rights group. And they have this on the meme, eating animals causes pandemics. I actually checked this with fact checkers and with experts, and they confirmed to me that this is not right. It's half right, half wrong, whatever you want, what side you want. Basically, eating animal itself, like eating meat, does not cause pandemics. But if you are in close proximity to sick animals with a virus, or you eat an animal that is sick with a virus, you are more likely, notice the word likely, to get the virus. But eating meat in itself, if well cooked and everything is well prepared, does not cause pandemics. So here, this is where the complexity of fact checking comes and where we get confused about what is reality. Take this example. I would like to see what you think. Is this fake or real? You can, by the way, in the chat, you can add a comment. Fake or real? What do you think? This is on Twitter, and someone is having this. Yes, sorry. It seems that my time is up almost. So I'll try to maybe 2 more minutes or 1 minute, Lisa.
Yeah, no, take your time. We got about 5 minutes. Certain people have to go back to work, but you've covered a great amount of content already. We don't have to have a hard stop, so.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
So I'll try my best to finish then. So what do you think? I cannot see the comments, but this is actually a true image. This is the cassowary animal. It's a real thing. I was like when I saw this, this is fake, but this is actually real. It's a real thing. And so again, when you talk about fact checking, sometimes things that seem to be authentic, genuine, real, end up not, and vice versa. Take another example. This is a Wikipedia entry called the Bicolum conflict. It's a whole war that has been listed here. It stayed on Wikipedia for many years until someone figured out, hey, this is fake. Someone figured out this is not real. Someone made up a whole war, and it was even cited by someone in a book. Basically, it's not real. There was no such thing. And Wikipedia then, removed it from the platform. But again, notice how this kind of, false information could bombard us from different sides and different places. And there are different forms of misinformation. These are some of the ones identified, 10 forms actually, by Conliffe and Jones. Some of them are satire. They seem to be, true, but they were just there for fun. But there are like different layers of misinformation. Some of it has a grain of truth, but the rest is false. And this again, in the end, makes us very confused. How can we know reality? We cannot be experts in everything because this is impossible. And It takes a lot of time even to fact check a few things. So that's where we have the challenge today. The challenge today is that there are different layers of misinformation. And I argue here that this is my argument, last few slides, that using a positivist empirical inquiry, wherein facts can be verified, is a very valid approach. But there is definitely the complexity of searching where the truth is, definitely. And when it comes to content perception or lay epistemology, it has to be subordinate to the objective fact or truth evaluated based on the collective intelligence or consensus among a group of experts. And by the way, when I say group of experts, they have to be really specialized in what they are doing. So even if you are a physician, a doctor, a medical doctor, it doesn't mean that you are an expert in vaccines. It has to be an expert in that area. So for me, truth versus falsity needs to be viewed as a spectrum, and this is how I envision it. It's a spectrum. We really don't know where the truth is, but it has to be viewed as this because sometimes it varies depending on what is misleading, on what is outright false, on what is outright truth. I think I'm done. Thank you very much for everyone and for listening.
Great, thank you. That was wonderful. All right, we have time for questions. Does anyone want to get the ball rolling?
I'm sorry if I haven't given answers to how to talk to misinformation believers, but there is actually no magic key here. We don't do brainwashing.
Oh, nope, and we wouldn't want that. It wouldn't
We
jive
don't,
with our
exactly.
values, would it?
Exactly. It's not
Okay.
our job. Yeah.
So I had a question. I'll get us started off. Are you finding that some social media outlets are better than others in terms of providing users with fact checks or AI information?
Good question, actually. I look at different platforms, including the alternative social media sites. So, for example, in Canada, we have Rumble, which is like the YouTube of extremist different groups that are not in the mainstream. Though today, of course, the mainstream is a bit of different, it's viewed differently. But I look at different platforms. Basically, I think the majority of all of the social media sites are not doing enough. Most of the work is done now on Meta, which is Instagram and Facebook, but not enough. Uh, I did a study about what is being fact-checked on Instagram specifically when it comes to health misinformation. And I found that from all the posts I collected, less than 1% was fact-checked. Less than 1%. It's not yet published, this study. It's still in process. I'm working on it, but I got sick. But they are not doing enough. So you find a lot of problematic content. But I must say that Instagram is doing more than the others currently because Twitter, almost gave up on moderation, except for the very serious, type of content like child porn or terrorism and stuff. But they almost gave up. And the other alternative social media sites like BitChute, Telegram, Rumble, Discord, they don't do it. They don't do nothing actually. So we see a clear lack of moderation policies. The reason is because they don't want to lose users. It's financial. They want to keep as many users as possible. If they want to, for example, penalize someone for posting problematic stuff, they use what is called shadow banning, which means like they hide that person without removing them from the platform. Because they know once they remove them, that person will go elsewhere and be active in another platform. And each person is definitely money.
Okay, thank you. Sherry.
Hi. I had a question. What do you say to people who say they don't get their information?
Oh, you cut out, Sherry.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, let's try again.
Okay. So what do you say to people who don't agree with mainstream media. That's not where they're going to get their information from. They would rather get it from different podcasts that are not journalists. So I guess journalism versus not a journalist.
Thank you. Well, it depends on the type of information you're talking about. Thank you for the question. So, for instance, if you're talking about political opinions and issues, I mean, I don't see any harm in getting ideas from different sources. But if it is about, for instance, scientific issues or your health, which is very important, I believe you've got to take your information from credible sources. And mind you, just go back to the issue of mainstream. Mainstream media has actually also failed us in many ways. If you look at, for instance, the different types of polls, public opinions and perceptions about mainstream media, it's increasingly decreasing over time, not only in Canada, but also in the United States, specifically in the United States. Some of the reasons are related to actually the failings of mainstream media. They don't do their job in the right way in many ways and many times, like fact checking enough or doing enough of their work. You know, I'm from Iraq. In 2003, the US administration used the claim that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction to wage a war. And I was like, are you kidding me? The whole country failed, and now it's a failed state, which is why I'm here, because of a lie. And that time, mainstream media didn't do its job. They failed us, actually. New York Times, Washington Post, just name it, all of them. And there are other like examples in Canada and elsewhere about how the failures of mainstream media. So some of it is justified, and that's why I'm saying that mainstream media has to do a better job. They have to work harder in regaining trust that has been increasingly decreasing throughout the decades. So I'll go back to the point. When it comes to politics, it's useful to have a variety of views. You're entitled to your opinion. But when it comes to facts, I think it's definitely you need to have credible sources and preferably look at more than two or three.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Yes, whoever, yeah, please go ahead, colleague.
Hi there. Thanks so much, Dr. El-Arawi. I guess this is following off of Sherry's comment or question, and just it seems nowadays there's so much information available. We've sort of lost, I think, as a society, an idea that there is a common place where we can find something that is quote unquote the truth. So everyone, and I think you talked about this with the echo chambers earlier and just sort of quickly addressed it, but just when everyone can sort of curate their own set of facts and their own reality, how do you counter misinformation with facts if we can't? We seem to be moving towards this place where that there's no shared understanding of what even the basic facts are, and just if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes, good question. But again, you know, we need to consult scientific consensus about different issues. Again, I would like to separate between the issues you're talking about. So if it is a scientific issue like climate change, pollution, number of immigrants, we have to look at the facts. As for other things like opinions regarding government policy, opinions regarding government performance, we will differ for sure. But what we need to definitely rely on is here, when it comes to scientific issues, has to be scientific consensus. Otherwise, we will be lost. Otherwise, we will be very much divided, and there will be so much misalignment between what the public knows and what the scientific community knows. There has to be an alignment. Otherwise, all the society will not function well. But again, I don't want to infringe on freedom of speech and expression. You are entitled to any kind of views, ideas you might have about politics and society. You can believe in anything you want. right? But when it comes to science, we have to follow scientific consensus about that. I think that's a good way of proceeding. Let me give you an example. Can I drink tap water? Is it safe? You can say, I'm doing a study actually about it now with fluoride because I was inspired by the discussion in the United States that fluoride is harmful. And I'm seeing a lot of discussion now about fluoride causing cancer or lowering people's IQ. There is no scientific basis behind these claims. These are just wild claims. If there were like research papers about that, I would agree. But since there is none, I am flagging this as misinformation. I hope I made myself clear and I addressed your question.
Yep, sounds good. In the chat, we're seeing lots of requests for your slides, so that's great. People have clearly found what you've said today meaningful and useful, of course. Mirella.
Thank you. I just want to double check in a way with our guest speaker, because what I heard was the fact that political, opinion or debate, it's not so important when we talk about, fact checking or, misinformation, disinformation versus, the scientific, part. And I would like to disagree with that, because just to take, the big elephant in the room, how you can just pass it as an opinion only and not, the fact check, the truth, taking, the neighbors, that Trump, was, I'm not finding my words right now, yeah. The win in 2020 was stolen from Trump, not that he lost, So that's one of the big issues, with the politics, and there are many and many like that. You have, both parties, and how you can just let it go. Those saying, oh my God, his win was stolen from him. It's not that he lost, plain and square, however you say in English.
Thank you. This is an excellent question, actually, and it's the core of fact checking. So when people are asked, fact checkers, professional fact checkers are asked to look at content, they distinguish between two types of content, opinion on the one hand and facts on the other hand. So I'm sorry if I have if I have not articulated myself well when it comes to politics, but I was specifically talking about political opinion, the word opinion here. But when it comes to factual claims about politics, definitely has to be fact checked. This is important. So, for example, if a political leader says that the number of immigrants is much higher in that specific city than the number of actual residents, this has to be fact checked. If someone says the election was stolen because of this has to be definitely fact checked. So I do agree with you. Whenever there are any kind of claims that are supposed to be based on facts, they have to be fact checked for sure. But you are entitled to your own opinion. If you say, for example, Justin Trudeau is bad, you cannot fact check that. It's just an opinion. That's up to you. It's freedom of expression. But if you say Justin Trudeau is bad because of these reasons, and you give numbers and you try to argue, then definitely this has to be the part of the numbers has to be fact checked. I hope I'm clear about this.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Patu, you had your hand up.
Sorry. Yes. So, Doctor, this is maybe a larger discussion and we won't have time, but it's just to to respond to the scientific basis of making sure that misinformation can be addressed or don't trigger emotional reaction from people. But throughout Canada and the American history, we know that science, and we do have now facts, the science has been used to either you know, perpetuate significant damages to natives, to blacks. So it is legitimate for citizens to doubt about the process of scientific procedures when they do have that historical um, background. And when COVID happened, a lot of people were were not were not being they didn't see that logic that the, even though you don't believe in science, you might contaminate somebody else, like children, old people, and harm their life. So maybe misinformation is just hiding that lack of confidence of the Karl Popper methodology, that the science is maybe in trouble, not just mainstream media or other institutions, but science itself has been lacking transparency and accountability towards citizens. That's just a comment. Thank you.
Can I respond? This is great. Honestly, this is a great question. And I totally agree with you that science has been weaponized for a very long time in serving some racist, even genocidal policies. When we talk about genetics and when you talk about eugenics, for example, the Nazi Germany regime used it to, justify its own Holocaust, its genocidal policies in different places, including the Gypsies. So it's very, very sad to see that science, or what we call scientific consensus at that time, was utilized by certain powerful governments to implement their own racist policies. I totally agree with you. And this only end up having people, mistrusting science itself. It's a challenge we have today. Um, so, but it also applies to, the point about mainstream media. There is, because of some of its failings, like the one you just mentioned about science, people started mistrusting mainstream media. It's decreasingly mistrusting. But if you look at public opinion in Canada, specifically, whom do people mostly trust in Canada? You can see number one, doctors. I don't remember number two, but number three is teachers. It's just because, like, I'm a teacher, I remember three. Two, I don't remember two, but it's basically still people in the science field world. There is still more trust. I think it's the army, I think, number two. Yeah. So basically, still in the field of science, there is still hope, in other words. But I do acknowledge the failings of science and how it has created a lot of mistrust. Let me give you an anecdote if I have time. One anecdote. It's real. So in its attempt to kill bin Laden, I know it's a bit different, but it's connected to science. In its attempt to kill bin Laden, the CIA actually created or manufactured a whole vaccination campaign in Pakistan. They wanted to take the DNA of the people living in that house where bin Laden was hiding. So they created a whole campaign, vaccination campaign for children, in order to enable them to get the DNA of people and make sure that it's actually bin Laden there. So they succeeded. They made sure they killed bin Laden. Good thing, they killed a terrorist. But what happened afterwards was something not discussed enough. It was a real tragedy. People in that region lost all confidence and trust in any kind of health campaigns. And what did this lead to? Thousands of children not vaccinated because their parents refused, saying that, oh, this could be another CIA operation. So it probably killed a lot of more people because of mistrust in science. It's being utilized by powerful parties for the same reason. This is a recent event, not an event that happened a long time ago. So I totally agree with you that we need to be very careful, especially when you have power as a powerful government. You cannot misuse science, otherwise we will end up in these situations.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for asking that, Fatya. Anyone else before we let Dr. Alrawi get back to his day? Oh, let's go with Tara.
Hi, thank you. Great talk. I'm curious to hear how you feel about our future. Are you hopeful for our future?
Well, thank you for the question. I appreciate you and I appreciate the question as well. I am very hopeful actually, because I think the kind of technology we have today is rapidly developing, and some of these technologies, like AI technology, could be actually used to, in collaboration with humans, of course, experts in the field, could actually be used to fact check more content on different platforms. And there is an increasing calls now for regulations. We need more regulations of these platforms, including Google, by the way. I would like to add Google search as a very important place where misinformation spreads. So that has to be done as well. We did a study about Google, and it's not being very much under researched. The same, by the way, applies to other places that are not yet well regulated, like Amazon Books. I know it sounds a bit weird, but there are so many books promoting conspiracies on Amazon Books being sold by Jeff Bezos. So I see an increasing trend in regulations. That's very helpful, and increasing use of AI. I know it could be used in a counter way, but I'm seeing hope there, especially if there is more coordination happening. Um, so I am hopeful of the future. 60-70% hopeful.
All right, thank you. And Sherry, your hand was up. You'll have last question.
Oh, it's not really a question. It was
Okay.
just more of it's just so hard to know where to go to do your fact checking. Somebody sent me some stats from the Canadian government and said this. Well, I don't know how to read these stats. I don't know what it's telling me. So it's so hard to know who to listen to. I don't know. It's really tough. That's all.
Totally agree with you. This is where journalists could help because they are considered to be intermediaries, like a bridge connecting between scientific facts or statistics and us, creating some kind of easy to read language so that they can actually translate that kind of specialized knowledge to regular people. I work in media. It doesn't mean that I'm an expert in everything in media. No, I'm very specific to certain issues in media. So to understand other issues, I actually need to spend a lot of time. Sometimes my head might explode to trying to understand or struggle with a few things. So that's totally right. And the problem we have today is that there aren't enough journalists doing this kind of work. Their numbers are decreasing. And this is the challenge we have, especially the challenge of local journalism, addressing the needs of local communities. It's all decreasing because of the emergence of these big social media platforms that took all the advertising revenues from them. So we are more like on our own today, and struggling to understand the world around us. And it's an ongoing thing. Some people give up, some people try. But what I suggest is we can try in certain areas because we cannot do everything.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and I'm a museums worker and I have media personalities that I work with doing local news stories, and their working conditions have changed too, right? Right now they have to do their own story. They have to do their own editing and things like that. So the working conditions speak to our inability to have journalists do the job that they're actually trained for as well. And that has an impact, all about the money, like it usually is. All right, so Marilla, I'm afraid we're out of time. If you like, let me know what your question is, and we can perhaps get Dr. Alrawi to answer it in a minute. And but yes, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today. This was very wonderful. And yeah, we're all at the beginning in terms of learning how we can better deal with misinformation. It's going to be a continuing problem as we all go forth in age and for generations to come. So thank you, Dr. Alrawi, for making it with us today. I know that you're not feeling the best, but yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm honored. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Okay, take care. Bye.